Hi. I'm never in the same setting, right? Not yet. Still, I just wanted to make this message because it's something that's on my mind, and I think it's very probably it's today. This is the topic of the day, and the theme is that about what you can call mistakes, learning of mistakes. Is that really true? There are some people saying like you have a life experience and you should learn and not do the same again. But what if, I want to challenge this a little bit, what if what you did wasn't really wrong, but what happened with the person or the situation, maybe someone exploited the situation, for example, or it was with the wrong person, not the ideal setting or something. Maybe the first thing wasn't the problem. For example, an example is like when a child learns to walk, it will fall many times. That doesn't mean that it was a wrong thing to try to learn to walk. The next time, the child will probably avoid certain mistakes it did, but it will continue to walk. And it will also move a little bit different, and its body will get adjusted. The muscles will get adjusted with practice, so it can also take practice. So what can we learn from this? A more concrete example that's been a theme in my life has been challenging relationships and dependency. And there is a difference in different kind of dependencies. And I think in this modern society that we have today, we are too afraid of being dependent on each other. I know this is very challenging for some people, but in the Western world, we are a lot like, especially in Sweden, we are totally super afraid of being dependent on someone else, because we have the option of not being. The society, we can all afford a little bit more difficult, but we can afford a living with one salary. Most parts of the country, we have a backup system in our society if something happens when we're sick or when we have children or something. And so we have with the luxury to say we don't need anybody, but we do. There are other kind of needs we have with each other. So in a healthy relationship, one takes care of each other in many different ways. It can be with economics that you need, or it can be that you need care of someone, you need love, like someone who sees you, someone to talk to, emotional needs, societal needs, children, having company with somebody. To not be alone is a pretty normal human need. And this is not only in partnership with romantic wise, it can be all sorts of relationships that we bond with each other, business wise or family and friends. And we are, in Sweden at least, we are so afraid of being dependent, but there is a healthy dependency, and it's when it's balanced. There is a, over time anyway, and between a group of people, there is a balance, give and take, sort of. And I think if you once been burned by, you put your faith in someone and they kind of burned you, you might be really afraid of putting yourself in that situation again. But it wasn't the situation that was wrong or your need that was wrong. It was maybe that person who took advantage of that. I've been in those situations where I put my faith into somebody. I felt I was young and I was feeling like, well, I really need a safe shoulder to lean on a bit. I need somebody to help me and take care of me a bit. And of course, I felt the same thing of taking care of that person. But that person took advantage of that. And then only took and didn't give anything back. And then somebody could say, like, have you learned from your mistakes? You should never put your, like, say that you need somebody. But that wasn't, it wasn't wrong of me that I needed someone in the first place. So this is what happens often, like some people, maybe you was in an accident, for example, and something happened and that was an accident, and you say, I will never ever do that again because that caused me so much pain. But maybe it wasn't that situation that was the problem. It was the circumstances in that situation that was the problem. Maybe you loved the thing that gave you the accident. Should you stop doing it? Maybe not. If it's not always a hazard to do it, but like if it's a safe thing and it was a really strong accident, maybe there was nothing wrong with doing that. So the big challenge here in life is to overcome what once caused us pain and to realize that it wasn't the thing that caused us pain that was the wrong, it was the circumstances around it or the people involved. Like we are putting ourselves in risk. Every time we take a job, for example, and we are employed somewhere, we are sort of dependent on the boss. We can change job, but we can be very dependent on that job situation for our family's safety, for our house loans or whatever. So there can always be situations where you end up having a really bad, terrible boss who exploit the power situation. And there are situations where there are not these situations. And what can you do if that's the case? Like, what happens if you end up in a terrible situation where someone exploits the power? Well, then you try to remove yourself out of that situation. To not be afraid of terminate a situation that ends up bad. To not be afraid of getting rid of that house or getting rid of those situations. Like, these are only things. You have to be prepared to lose everything you have in order to seek the right circumstances and seek the right situations and seek the right people. It's not a wrong thing to take a job and be dependent as an employee. It's not a wrong thing to get into a situation with a romantic relationship where you need each other. It's nothing wrong, that somebody need you in a friendship, for example. It's not wrong to give, even if that's been exploited. It was never a wrong thing to give, but if you never get anything back, then you move on. So I once was listening to a woman. I think she had it kind of a healthy approach. Like, how did you get where you got? Well, I just gave everything. I gave everything of me. I tried to, for the person that was, she was an employee, she gave everything to her boss. Like, she tried to make the boss shine and tried to make really good, and she was great at her job. And the first jobs, they were just like, okay, thank you, and they never gave anything back, and they didn't acknowledge her. And after a while, then she decided, well, then I'm not appreciated enough here, so I will move on. And she kept on moving on until she was appreciated for who she was. And today she was like top leading in her field. And just like, it's never wrong if you're like, for example, you get into a relationship and you give everything from yourself to somebody. That's not the wrong thing to hold. You shouldn't hold back on yourself. You should always be generous, but just like acknowledge it's not appreciated, or maybe it's even exploited. Well, then you move on, right? You can't demand things from other people, like tell them that they should behave a certain way or whatever. If they're like a aware person, they don't take you for granted. They appreciate you and they show you that. Any situation that means in family life, friendships, partnership, romantic partnership, business partnerships, situations, workplaces. And so then it's like coming from a place of a more love, and what I mean with that is more coming from a space without fear, that you don't hold back and you are not afraid of being generous with yourself just because you think somebody will take something from you, or that something will be messed up. There are no situations that can't be solved in the future. If something goes bad, which you will never know in advance, either you start up a business or you start a new employment or you get into a relationship or something. If you try something, if it doesn't turn out the way you were expecting it to be, or if you don't feel good about the situation. But there is a second point here. The one thing when I started to talk with a baby who will learn to walk, it's also that that baby can learn to practice their muscles and the skills to be able to cope with the same situation but better. Maybe it wasn't prepared for that situation. So that can also be the case, that you are not prepared. The situation and everything can be perfect. And there's something you need, there's something you want, it's something that's going to be in your future. You're going to walk in the future, for example. But your muscles and your system is just not prepared to meet that pressure on your legs, for example. So you have to practice, and it takes some time. It takes some months for it to learn to walk before the muscles are strong enough to hold its body weight. And it's a frustrating time. But by time, it's a piece of cake. Yeah, I think that was the message. So, bye-bye. Ciao, adios.